Here's Curry for the record. It's good! Stephen Curry, the all-time three-point king in the NBA.
Curry wide open.
Wide open. And Smith, what a way to do it!
He hits one high. He hits one deep. McCovey calls.
How many touchdowns is that for Tom Brady?
Number 700 all-time comes on the game winner.
Hey, Shek, real quick. What's the all-time home run record?
It's 762, Ryan Shazier. Barry Bonds handles fastballs over the middle of the plate or otherwise. Damashek handles all your sports trivia questions. This is, of course, my wheelhouse. But records we grew up on are changing thanks to Bonds and Brady, Tiger and LeBron. So will memorable records ever make a comeback? Mike Greenberg from ESPN is here with the answer.
You said when we grew up, you mean more like when you grew up.
Yeah, time for you to grow up already.
From Wondery, I'm Ryan Shazier.
And I'm Dave Damashek.
And this is Don't Call It a Comeback.
Don't call it a comeback. I've been waiting on this moment my whole life. Can't call it a comeback. Everybody to your feet, make arenas rise. Yeah, I'm saying from the left to right, we get it on tonight. We do it all, but we don't back down. Just give me one shot, one chance, I'ma take it. Fixing up the game, but these records I keep on breaking.
Shek, let's talk records and numbers.
Ooh, I like that. I got a number for you. 3, as in 3 words. Ooh, la, and la. I love this subject. Let's get into it. Baseball season is back. Golf majors are back. The NFL draft, the NBA playoffs, the Stanley Cup playoffs are all just around the corner, so we're breaking format a bit to talk comebacks of a slightly different variety, the comeback of sports records and record breakers. Growing up, we obsessed over these numbers. We memorized the big ones. I say Hank Aaron, and you say what, Shazier?
755.
Very nice.
There's a new home run champion of all time, and it's Henry Aaron.
Kareem was the all-time scoring leader for decades, and no QB was ever going to fill a hand with Super Bowl rings like Montana and Bradshaw once did with 4 apiece. Well, many of those numbers are now meaningless, thanks to Brady, Bonds, and just a few weeks ago, LeBron.
James, a shot at history. And there it is! LeBron stands alone!
Guys like Tiger, Djokovic, and Mahomes are blowing up record books as well.
Mahomes, Kelsey, looking for his third. He found it! Touchdown!
Here for more on the Resurgence, a record-breaking in recent years author of the new book, Got Your Number, The Greatest Sports Legends and the Numbers They Own. We've got ESPN's Mike Greenberg. What's happening, man?
Hello, guys. Thank you very much for having me. It is a delight to catch up. Ryan, we haven't seen each other in a long time.
It's good to see you again, Greeny. You know, last time I seen you, it was well, in person. I see you every morning, but last time I seen you in person was when I went to the Pro Bowl in Orlando.
I miss the Orlando days. That was a lot easier for me to get to.
Today, we're going to talk about, records, numbers, and why did, records, numbers, why did they mean so much to us as kids growing up?
I think they mean so much to us as adults. I mean, maybe I'm just a very old kid at this point, but, numbers. So let me give you a quick background on this. We were sitting around, a bunch of us, after the show one day. We do get up, and now we're all sitting together, and because we're just a bunch of sports geeks, someone in the room makes the observation of how many quarterbacks that are in the Hall of Fame all wore the number 12. This is the kind of conversation that people with absolutely no other things in their lives have. Terry Bradshaw and Roger Staubach and Bob Greasy and Joe Namath and Jim Kelly and someday Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers. Someone in the room said, well, they all wore the number 12, but which one of them owns the number 12? And boom. That's literally a lightning bolt hit me. And I on my drive home that day, I called up my literary agent and I said, I think I have an idea for a book. And this is my first sports book because I've never had an idea that I thought worked before. But what I did as we researched this is that I learned that numbers, something that I think I already knew, but I don't think I had conceptualized it enough. Numbers are an absolutely inextricable piece of sports. Like, it is the way we measure. I mean, maybe this is an overly obvious thing to say, but it is the way we measure literally everything. The numbers that are in this book are not limited to jersey numbers. Those are easy. Like 23 was easy, and 99 was easy, and 42 was easy, and 3 was easy. But we quickly learned, and when I say we, my main man, Hembo, who did all the research for the book and is just the best. we quickly figured out that if we were just going to limit this to jersey numbers, now there's no room for Muhammad Ali or Tiger Woods or so many other athletes who play individual sports and different kinds of athletes. And the numbers in some of those cases mean just as much. So, at the risk of giving a lot of things away, because I think part of the fun, hopefully, for people will be seeing the choices we made. But for example, the number 72 belongs to the 1972 Miami Dolphins, the unbeaten Dolphins. When I think of the number 72, that's what I think of. The number 85 belongs to the 85 Bears and other decisions like that. Those numbers mean everything. You can identify almost everything in sports with a number, and then of course, things like, well, let's just say when I was a kid, 714 was a number that everybody knew. 715 was a number that everybody knew. One of the hardest decisions we had to make in this book was the number 56. When you hear the number 56, do you think of Lawrence Taylor or do you think of Joe DiMaggio's hitting streak? The answer to that probably has a lot to do with how old you are. But those are the kinds of things. So you can own a number in a lot of different ways. And numbers are in some ways the most directly identifiable piece of sports. And so as we learned that, I got more and more excited about the idea. And then I'll tell you the way this thing works is you write the book, you send it in, and then it's almost a year before it comes out. And so about a month ago, I recorded the audio. And so I read every word of it from start to finish. And as I was going through it, I thought to myself, wow, this is pretty good. Like there's some really interesting stuff in here. So I hope that people who read it will find that even some of those that you may think you know everything there is to know about Pele, for example. I assure you, you do not. You may think you know everything there is to know about Babe Ruth. I assure you, you do not. Hembo uncovered stuff in the research for this book that was fascinating to me, and I've been in and around sports literally my entire life. So I hope that people who enjoy sports history and sports debate will get a lot out of this, because I know that in the process of putting it together, I did.
Well, I'm already swooning without even having read a page of it. You, Hembo, me, geeks all. I'm just going to let the producers know we're going to need about 7.5 hours more for this conversation. Here, just at the tip of the iceberg. I'm curious, though, if you're bothered with these, I obsess over the numbers and what they mean generation to generation. Are you as bothered as I am for the younger people out there by the lack of context with, let's say, the single season rushing record? That O.J. Simpson, I don't know what happened to him when he finished his football career, but while he was playing, he put up the greatest single rushing season in history. But if you look at the record books, he only ranks 8th. And that's because everybody else who hit 2K had 16 games versus his 14. Are you bothered, though, in the larger sense by that inability to contextualize that?
I am, and I actually think for that there's an easy fix. And I have brought this up on my radio show in the context of the single season home run record as well, that there are easy ways to contextualize these things in record books, and they don't involve asterisks, which was 100% the wrong way to go about this in 1961. The right way to go about this is to say, this is the 12-game single season rushing record held by Jim Brown. This is the 14-game single-season rushing record held by O.J. Simpson. This is the 16-game single-season rushing record held by Eric Dickerson. Someday, this will be the 17-game. I'm assuming that will get broken with the extra game now. Now, with the reliance on the passing game in the NFL and the multi-back schemes, maybe it never does get surpassed. I have to assume it eventually will. And when it does get broken, then you say this is the 17-game single season rushing record. That I don't think is diminishing anything. I don't think it is diminishing Eric Dickerson to say Jim Brown did this in 19 whatever year it was, and that OJ did this in 72, and that all of that. So I think that's easy to do, and I do think that we could do it easily. People, there has to be context. My friend JJ Redick, who I like a lot and respect a lot, when he compares his era to eras before, he and I have had these conversations. Like, to me, it doesn't make any sense to, let's just use for the debate that came up. It makes no sense to compare Bob Cousy to Kyrie Irving in the way of, well, this is the talent that one of them had relative to the talent the other one of them had. You can only judge players relative to the talent that everyone else had at the time that they were playing. Yes, of course. If you just picked up Kyrie Irving right now and put him in the NBA in the 1950s, he would easily be the best player in the league. But the reality is, if you had access to the nutrition and to the exercise and whatever other reasons that Kyrie Irving is able to be what Kyrie Irving is able to be now, and no one could have been 70 years ago, then everyone would have been better than they were. You can only compare people relative to the eras in which they played. And that is the context that I think we lose with a lot of this conversation. Like if you picked up, Ryan, if in the 1970s, the Pittsburgh Steelers offensive lines, which you can make an argument were the greatest offensive lines that ever played in the history of the sport. There are a lot of reasons for that, but whatever. The heaviest of them weighed 275 pounds. Now, that guy's a linebacker now,
Yeah,
right?
That's crazy.
So you can't compare those guys to whoever is the, I don't know, Mekhi Becton today, who literally weighs 100 pounds more than that and plays the same position. You can only compare these people. I think Anthony Munoz is the greatest offensive tackle that ever lived. If he came out of retirement, if he came into the league right now exactly as he did in the year that he did, people would say he's much too small to play tackle in the NFL. So everything has to be based upon the context in which it existed. To me, it's just nonsensical not to view it that way.
I'm gonna have to argue with that one. Obviously, I'm a former Buckeye, so I like to go to Orlando Pace.
So no, what my point is that Orlando Pace is not better than Anthony Munoz because he's bigger and stronger. That would be a
100%.
terrible reason to make that argument. You want to argue that Pace is the best player? Fine, that's a great argument to have.
Yeah.
You want to make an argument that one of them is better than the other because he outweighs him by 40 pounds. That's where
That's a terrible argument, because then you can look at somebody that looks like Jadeveon Clowney. He has the height, weight, speed, all the attributes, but then you look at James Harrison. He doesn't have the height. He doesn't have the speed. He does, he doesn't have the weight, but he was the defensive MVP, and hopefully he makes it to the Hall of Fame. He definitely has a resume that like he's on the edge. So you definitely can make that argument. Going back to that, people never thought that somebody could have, 4 rings, 5 rings. Montana was able to do it. Bradshaw was able to do it. Then now Tom Brady has 7 rings. 7 rings. Now Tom Brady has more rings than every team in the NFL. Do you think that somebody will pass him down the road?
Not anytime soon. All right, that's a ridiculously obvious statement. No one is close enough to do it anytime soon. We would all point to one active player and say, if anyone's going to do it, it would be Patrick Mahomes. That would seem to be the obvious candidate amongst active players. My inclination is to say that the conference in which Mahomes currently plays, the league in which he plays, and in particular the conference in which he plays, is so competitive that the idea that he is going to get through the combination of Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson. Again, all these guys could wind up changing places and stuff like that. For all I know, Lamar Jackson will be in the NFC next year. But that combination of people, the idea that Mahomes is going to get through that 7 times, I would bet against it. But if anyone is going to do it, then he would seem to be the obvious first choice. So the answer to your question is, do I think anyone will do it? Eventually, yes. I think all records, well, not all records. No one's ever going to break Cy Young's wins record in Major League Baseball. Do I think someone will eventually win 7 Super Bowls as an actor, as a player? Probably. But I think it could very well be after any of us are around to see it and talk about it.
Don't call it a comeback.
I think it's a really interesting thing specific to quarterbacks and how we evaluate them. I am a QB wins guy for the record. Tom Brady, Joe Montana, and Patrick Mahomes are the 3 best. They will go down in history in all likelihood as the 3 greatest of the Super Bowl era, but no one saw them coming necessarily as going down as an all-time great. But I think we've seen the deeds of Brady. We buy him as the greatest of all time. He then should be at the top of all the significant passing records. Where's the greatest disparity that your eye has caught in any sport between the significance of the number and the guy who holds it, which is to say, let's say it's the Timmy Smith Award, the single game rushing leader in Super Bowl history. It's underwhelming that that's the guy who has that record. Is there a number out there that you're like, that guy is the all-time?
No. And I'll tell you why, because for the reason that I gave you at the beginning, there is no player for the numbers where there were no obvious jersey choices. We found other ways to use those numbers. So I'm trying to think of a good example of that. Well, I'll give away an obvious one. Number 73, we gave to Billie Jean King, because that was the year of the Battle of the Sexes. And some of the research we got on Billie Jean King is unbelievable. So 2 years after that, 1975, 17 magazine, which was a hugely popular and influential magazine at the time, with obviously an overwhelmingly female readership, did a poll of its readers and asked who was the most admired woman in the world. The woman who finished second was Golda Meir, who was the prime minister of Israel. Billie Jean King finished first. She was the most admired woman in the world amongst the readers of this magazine. So she's got 73. So there is no number that you will say, well, wait a minute, you gave that to, I don't even want to attach a name to it. You gave that to Joe Klecko. I mean, Joe Klecko is my favorite player that ever lived, and he wore number 73, and he just got into the Hall of Fame, and I couldn't be happier about it. And I'm going to go to Canton for the first time in my life to see him be inducted. But he doesn't belong on a list with Tom Brady and Jerry Rice and Wayne Gretzky and Michael Jordan. But Billie Jean King does. Serena Williams has a number in this book. Chris Evert and Martina Navratilova have numbers in this book. Arnold Palmer has a number in this book. Jack Nicklaus, Rod Laver, the greatest athletes, Dale Earnhardt, Richard Petty, the greatest legends in the history of all the different sports. So I don't think there's a single one that you will say this person doesn't belong. And there's a horse, and I don't think, and you can probably guess which horse it is. There's not a single one of them where you will say this person, or in one case, horse, does not belong in the conversation with all the others. And I will say there's one number that is shared by two people. I won't give away who they are, but you will both be delighted to know that they played for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
And there's one number?
It's two numbers that go to one entity.
Okay. It's probably 33.
It isn't, but okay.
It isn't? Okay, cool.
That's
cool,
a
cool.
mind bender for me. I'm going to have to ponder that one. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Shazier, while I think about what that could be.
Yeah, if anybody figure it out, it'll be Dave. So do you think there'll ever be a comeback where a lady will be able to beat, the top men in tennis again?
So to be clear, I mean, for people, Billie Jean King did not beat the top male in tennis at the time. She beat Bobby Riggs when he was well in his 60s. No, I mean, probably not. Look, Serena Williams is the greatest female tennis player that ever lived. And I think you could make a pretty good argument that she is the greatest tennis player that ever lived. That would be a good debate to have. And the people that you'd be comparing her to would mostly be men. She couldn't beat them, but that's totally irrelevant. There's nothing I hate more than when people try to diminish the accomplishments of female athletes because they couldn't beat men doing them. That's why we separate these things. The greatest female soccer, Megan Rapinoe, I don't know who would be considered to be the greatest female soccer player of all time, and certainly whoever that might be. She belongs on a list. Abby Wambach, I'm just using that, Mia Hamm, whomever it is that you might want to use as a placeholder for that argument. She belongs in the discussion with Pele and Lionel Messi as the greatest soccer players of all time, despite the fact that if she had been on the same fields as them, she could not have competed at the same level. She was not meant to. That's not the way these things are meant to be judged. So, I think that we could see a time where female athletes compete amongst men in various sports. And I certainly think we are nearing a time when we will see women coaching in big-time men's sports. We already see it, of course, on the assistant level in many places, in the NFL, in the NBA, And I think that it's just a matter of time before there are women who are head coaches in the NBA. There are women who are head coaches in the National Football League. I don't know how long that'll take. Maybe it'll be a year, maybe it'll be 10 years. Those things will happen. But I don't know that, and not all of them will have enormous consequence when they take place, because there'll be barriers broken down. And then the objective here is that we get to a place where we no longer even think of it. And that's the way the world evolves, generation by generation. But when you read the chapter about Billie Jean King, the importance of that match, what it meant to so many people, as I wrote in the book, this is not something that can be measured. But I think it is very possible that there has never been a sporting event that meant more to more women in the world than that one did. That's not something I can measure it versus something else necessarily, but the impact that had, it was incalculable. And I hope that there will be others that will come like that. Like when a woman is being carried off the field on the shoulders of NFL players, and then just had a bucket of Gatorade dumped on her because she was the head coach of a team that won the Super Bowl, that will be a moment that will transcend almost anything we've ever seen before. And I believe it will happen. I have no idea how soon, but I believe we will live to see that day. I think that will happen before someone will win 7 Super Bowls. Let's put it that way.
You lead me into something that is an ongoing debate between my pals and I, which is you talk about, you hear so often, you had to be there. If you were there, you would understand how significant the moment was. And where do you come down then on the visceral versus the numbers? I asked you that question 5 minutes ago about the disparity between the significance of a career number versus who holds it. And I'm not diminishing Emmitt Smith's greatness, or maybe I am a little bit. He's not the greatest running back in pro football history. And I watched him, and I know that because I had my eyes on him and his peer group of the time and guys on either side of him generationally. So how do you, I always knock my friends who say Jim Brown's the greatest running back of all time. And my pushback on that is, what's your favorite Jim Brown game? You've never seen a Jim Brown game. How can you regard him as better than somebody who you actually saw with your O2 eyes?
It's very hard to do, but for a book like this, you have to do it. I mean, obviously, I never saw Babe Ruth play. I'm not old enough to remember the Battle of the Sexes, which we just talked about. I'm not old enough to remember the Thrilla in Manila or the Rumble in the Jungle, but I'm more than aware of the magnitude of Muhammad Ali. And I hope, perhaps, that one of the things that sports fans will enjoy about the book is learning about this stuff. Like, there was so much that I learned about this. I'll give you an example. There was a civil war in Nigeria in which over 1 million people were killed. They called a 48-hour ceasefire during this war so they could watch the Nigerian national soccer team play against Pele. A war literally stopped. People stopped killing each other to watch Pele play soccer. How does one measure the value of that? You know what I mean? Like, it's not about, was he better than Lionel Messi? It was that no one ever stopped a war to watch Messi play soccer. So that's the kind of thing that we found in the research to the book. During World War II, when there were battles between the U.S. forces and the Japanese forces, when charging the American forces, were shouting, "Go to hell, Babe Ruth." Like, they identified the United States with Babe Ruth. How does one measure how important a figure culturally that made Babe Ruth? That didn't happen in any more recent wars. People weren't saying that about Peyton Manning. So that's the kind of thing, that's the visceral, that there have been some athletes who just became more important for whatever reasons, who became important because of things that could not be measured, for the same reason that if you made a list of the 10 greatest baseball players that ever lived, the most accomplished baseball players that ever lived, Jackie Robinson wouldn't be on it. But if you made any list of the most important baseball players that ever lived, and Jackie Robinson wasn't on it, then your list would be discounted by any sensible human being immediately.
One of the 10 most significant human beings of the 20th century, right?
100%. 100%. He's unquestionably one of the 10 most important Americans of the 20th century. I mean, without debate. But very little of that is because of how good a player he was, right? He happens to have been. And in fact, in the Jackie chapter, what Hembo and I chose to do was I wrote at the beginning, look, entire books and films have been and will continue to be made and written about the impact culturally that Jackie Robinson had. I can't do it justice in 500 words. Here's what I can do. I can explain that Robinson was a great freaking player. And I don't know that everybody knows that. And so that's what the chapter about Jackie is about. It is about how great a player he was. That's what I thought of when you asked me your question, was that there are ways to measure these people that go beyond the numbers, and we just chose the numbers to represent them, and that's how they all are in the book.
Well, I'll tell you, I really do feel like, personally, vainly, I would love for this to go on for another, another few days here. But listen, you're sitting, you joined us from a doctor's office. I mean, this is the equivalent of Jordan's flu game. You're in the doctor's office yapping with us. We're flattered, right, Shazier?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you so much, Greeny. And we just really appreciate you being here with us. And it's been an amazing conversation. I would have loved to keep going.
Well, let's do it again sometime, guys. I'm happy to do it. And I've enjoyed it too. I like talking with people who enjoy. You'll get a kick out of this as a final thought. The way this conversation began, the conversation about all the number 12s, was that there was a day, it was the same day, that we decided we were going to try and name every NFL team's place kicker in 1977. And I am ashamed to say we did it. When I say that, there were two reactions. One of them is, I never want to be in a conversation with that collection of people. The other is, I'd love to have that conversation. I love people who want to have that conversation. So I can tell this is the podcast for me.
I don't want to hold you up, Greeny, but I do want to say I have found in my life that there is an inverse relationship between how good you are at a sport and how fascinated you are by the numbers and the history of it. Ryan Shazier probably is much less enthused about the historical numbers as a nerd like me. Here's my shot in the dark about your Steelers question. 64 and 73, the fourth quarter bombs that Terry Bradshaw completed to win not one but two Super Bowls. The only guy
to throw over 50-yard touchdown passes in fourth quarters of Super Bowls, and he did it twice.
I like that, but that isn't it. The numbers are consecutive. They are two numbers that come back to back.
It's probably 58 and 59.
Ding, 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 ding. We needed a way to represent the entire Steel Curtain defense, and we represented them with the Jacks, Lambert and Ham. I wanted the Steel Curtain to be in there, and so we gave the Steel Curtain the numbers 58 and 59. That is well done, Ryan. Well done. You were the first person who has guessed that.
Yeah, once you said they're consecutive, I knew exactly who it was.
Here, that's correct.
Yep.
Oh, my goodness. See, now you're singing my song. Now I wish you well with your soon-to-be green. Well, he already wore a green number 12, but I think he's going to wear a slightly different shade of it in New York for your team. Good luck with Aaron Rodgers and all the rest of it. Great success wished for you. We know it's coming with this great book. Thank you, Mike Greenberg, for all the time.
Thank you, fellas. I really enjoyed it.
Got Your Number, the greatest sports legends and the numbers they own by the great Mike Greenberg. What a time this was.
Yeah, this is awesome.
We dragged you into our world, Shazier. Now you see how our brains work here. The book, one more time, Got Your Number, the greatest sports legends and the numbers they own. And, of course, it has spurred more conversation coming up in just a second here on The Checkdown.
Don't call it a comeback.
So Mike's new book touches on something I love. It's jersey numbers, as you could just tell from the conversation there. So for the checkdown, we're going to play a game. We're talking numbers. This is the checkdown. Shazier, you're going to say a number, and I'll say which athlete belongs with that number, kind of like we were just doing there with Greeny. First thing that comes to mind, just blurt it out. Sound good to you?
Yeah, that sounds good. I'm definitely gonna have to, sometimes counter some of your arguments just to give you a heads up.
I won't hear it. Please, producers, kill his mic if he gets in the way.
Yeah, so I'm gonna have to counter it. And I love doing this with my friends anyway. So I'm gonna give you an easy one. If you get this wrong, man, if you get this wrong, you're fired. If you get this wrong, you're fired. All right, let's start with the classic. 23.
Okay, come on. I'm warmed up. Let's go. Next. I think we know the answer to that one.
All right. How about 12?
Well, that's a fun one. It is Tom Brady, of course, but it is the best quarterback number in terms of great players who wore it. If I were a quarterback and given a choice 1 through 19, I would go with number 7. Why? Because it is an aspirational number. If you blur your eyes a little bit, it looks like an arrow kind of pointed upward. You understand? That would be my aesthetic choice. But yes, I think Brady is the obvious answer here.
All right. So I'm gonna make it a little bit harder for you. 32.
32, we are required to shout out as two Pittsburgh Steelers lovers to shout out the great Franco Harris. I think you probably have to go with Jim Brown over Franco by a whisker, and I hate to do that, but trying to be objective and what the collective wisdom is about running backs historically, people insist upon that. But Magic Johnson also has to get a shout out here, as does Sandy Koufax. It is the maybe greatest number.
You have to pick one.
I'm just giving you the options. I'm going to go with Magic here, because I feel he's a little slept on when you see the all-time lift. We've now gone with Kareem versus Jordan, and we're leaving Magic and Bird, for that matter, out.
I'll be honest, I thought you was going to go Jim Brown because you're such a football lover. So I thought you were going to go Jim Brown.
I have a hard time mounting an argument for a guy that I've never seen play 60 minutes, a 60-minute game. I'm
going to have to go with Magic with you as well. He was the all-time assist leader, or he's the guy I'm going to have to go with at 32.
I think Stockton's way ahead of him at this point. But yeah, he was a unicorn. There was nothing ever like him in basketball before he made the scene.
All right. Now we're going to make it a little bit more tricky. Who's the best 13?
Well, I think it's Dan Marino by a whisker over Wilt the Stilt. It's funny that the 3 greatest 13s are probably Marino, Alex Rodriguez, and Wilt Chamberlain, and for all their great numbers and personal success. And Wilt and A-Rod did get titles ultimately, and Marino didn't. I think the thing that joins the 3 of them is that they feel like they didn't win as much as they should have from a team aspect. No. So, but I'm going to go with Marino by a hair, because my argument would be not just that, I watched him at Pitt Stadium when I was a little kid. I think he's a guy who you could put in the 70s, put in 2023, and he would succeed. I think he transcends eras of football. I think he would be great in any of them.
I think Wilt and A-Rod do that as well.
Okay, fair point. Yeah, that's okay.
I think they both do that as well. I'll have to go with Dan Marino. I'm just gonna go with the homer. He's from Pitt, but then he also went to where I'm from in Florida. People still say he might be the greatest quarterback ever. He just never won a championship. That really says a lot. I think I'll have to go with Dan for that.
That arm was live, and he could move before he tore his Achilles. That's the thing kids don't know about him, is he could move until about 5 years into the NFL. I have a picture of me as a little kid sitting on freshman Dan Marino's knee, and you are so young, I think you probably never saw Dan Marino play for the Miami Dolphins. Is that right?
Yeah, you're 100% correct.
All right, move on.
Who's the best number 8?
With a shout out to Steve Young, the arch rival of Troy Aikman. By the way, the aforementioned conversation about same number QBs playing each other in big games. Obviously, Young's 49ers and Aikman's Cowboys went head to head a few times in some classics in the early 90s. I'm going to skip both of them in favor of the great 8, Alex Ovechkin, who is going to catch Wayne Gretzky. A number a lot of people thought no one would ever catch. Ovechkin is going to break the all-time goals record. Just like Greeny mentioned, 58 and 59 being combined. I think it's interesting that these arch rivals, Alex Ovechkin and Sidney Crosby, are now together for eternity, because when hockey was in a real perilous spot and it may not even survive, those two guys made the scene, and there were high expectations for both. Both exceeded them. They saved the sport, and they are legends for all of time. I'm going with a grade 8.
Yeah, so I would have to go with Steve Young on this one. I know Ovechkin he's awesome. We have Hank in here who's a fan of the enemy over there, the Washington Caps, and I'm not a big fan of those guys. Ovechkin's definitely hurt my heart a few times.
I don't like him. I didn't say I'm a fan.
I feel Troy Aikman's teams were better than he technically was, and he was a good quarterback. But if we're going to start talking about numbers, if you look at his numbers weren't the greatest numbers. If you really look at them, I would have to go with Steve Young. I think Steve Young, what he did when he was at quarterback. I understand a lot of people say Joe Montana was better, but man, I know he was pretty dang good when he was at the 49ers, and he led them to multiple championships, and, I would have to go with Steve Young.
People want to argue with me about QB wins, and they're a product of team and all of that. But yes, as we look back, who wins the most is the guy who goes down as the greatest legend, and Aikman got 3. Steve Young barely got that 1, or else what would the conversation be around him if he didn't even get that one?
All right, so I know your answer for this one. I know my wife's answer for this one. So who was the greatest 21?
Clemente, and I'm not going to argue with you about Primetime. Primetime is an icon. I can't believe that he transcends, unlike his peers, most of the star power among other football players, younger generation. It dims a little bit. Man, you watch Deion Sanders, obviously with those Colorado kids, but with NFL football players of the 21st century, they still swoon when they see him. But I'm going Clemente over him and Tim Duncan. How say you?
My wife is definitely choosing Timmy D. Because, she's from San Antonio. Man, I understand David Robinson was great, but Tim led him to 5 championships. Man, he was a great player. I loved him. But I'm going to have to go with Primetime, man. I'm going to have to go with Primetime.
I'm not going to argue. Yeah, that makes am I right, though, that there's nobody who played in that era who
that transcends like now
resonates now as much as Primetime does?
I think the reason Prime resonates so much is because he was flashy back then how guys are now. So it's like it makes it really easy for people want to be like him, because it's like, I could be like Prime. I could be like Prime. Back then when Prime was doing that, he was an outlier. He was the one guy doing that. He was the one guy being flashy and still living up to the flash. And most people, if you were flashy, they get punched in the mouth or they couldn't perform like that. I remember one time they said Desmond Howard, when he was a rookie, he had went out there, returned the kickoff. Primetime wasn't even the kickoff return man no more. He got pissed off. It was like, hey, coach, I'm about to go return the kick. Obviously, the coach ain't going to say no. Use Primetime. And he just took Desmond Howard's moment that quick. He's like, yep, no. Hey, I'm just going to let you know that this is my house. You ain't doing that today. All right, 33.
So are we sure Deion, who didn't tackle, was better than the 2 Steelers, Rod Woodson or Mel Blount? Again, we'll have that conversation down the line.
All right, 33.
33, you say? This is another juicy number here that covers pretty much all the sports, the big-time sports. I grew up, Tony Dorsett was a name around my house. He became Dorsett once he got fancy. Down in Big D there, one of the great running backs. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Larry Bird, Patrick Waugh. I guess that makes 33 the richest number, covering the 4 major sports there. I'm going to go with Kareem, but this is a tough one because I just said about Magic. I feel like somehow Magic and Bird, who are tied together for eternity, like I said about Ovechkin and Crosby, I feel like individually then they get diminished a little bit, do Bird and Magic, because they're tethered together. I think Kareem's the right answer, though. He is the greatest scoring center of all time, and I know Wilt Chamberlain had more. Contextualize the numbers, and so I'm going to go with the former Lou Alcindor.
Lou Alcindor.
Yeah, that was Kareem's name.
I know. I like that. I had a flash from me really quick. I was like, oh, you threw me off. But yeah, obviously that's Kareem. And to me, and we're going to see him in winning time again too, Hey,
right.
Remember we talked about that. I'm going to have to go with Kareem. Obviously, he had the most points in NBA history until LeBron just took him that away. Dorsett had, multiple championships, but Kareem's done that. Bird had multiple championships, but Kareem's done that. Kareem has won at every level and has been the greatest at every level that he's played at: high school, college, and pro. And that number carried with him. 33 is for sure is Kareem's.
Yeah, I'm with you on Kareem and what he did. And the thing that vexes me forever is, why can no one else learn how to do the sky hook? It is unstoppable. No one can block it. Why doesn't a tall guy learn how to do that now? Anyway,
because it's like nobody plays in the paint no more. So what about this one? 34.
Well, another rich number there. I love Shaq. The dominant force, a guy who, if you dropped him into 2023, could disrupt this perimeter shooting that the NBA has now become. How many shooters can you space out on the floor at one time? Shaq, if you dropped him in, would be enough as a single figure to end that era and return it to what we saw in the early part of this millennium. Nolan Ryan, great. But Walter Payton, sweetness. I mentioned Emmitt Smith at the back, he played at the same time. He was better than Emmitt Smith. He was better than anyone I've ever seen at that position. 34 forever, Walter Payton.
Who was the most dominant player to ever play basketball?
Wilt. Wilt was, but, you do have to asterisk that, though, and say that when he went head-to-head with Bill Russell, he didn't beat him very often. And, of course, the team in Boston was superior to what Wilt had around him. So, but in terms of statistical dominance, it's hard to argue against Wilt Chamberlain in basketball.
No, I'm talking about pure dominance.
In that case, then I guess I will go with Shaq. He was unstoppable. There was nothing you could do. He did. People would lament. I was in Los Angeles while they were winning those titles, and even then, people would say he can't shoot free throws, which is a valid criticism. And boy, he really doesn't have a game outside of 12 feet, and it never made a difference. He didn't need one. Pound the ball on the block to him. There was nothing anybody could do about it.
I know Walter Payton was a dog, but I got to go with Shaq. Two more. All right, 19.
Stevie Y is a Detroit legend. Willis Regis passed away, a legend, obviously, in Manhattan for all the time, but I'll go with Johnny U. Before pro football really ripened and reached the Super Bowl era, got there in large part because of Unitas's greatness, 1958 title game and beyond. He was the central figure as the sport was still on the rise. So I'll go with number 19, Johnny Unitas of the Baltimore Colts, previously of the Pittsburgh Steelers.
I would just have to go with you on this Johnny Unitas one, because everybody with the number 19 is a little bit beyond my generation, so I don't know much about those guys as much. So
I didn't see Johnny Unitas play myself. Let's not get crazy. I'm not an 87-year-old man or anything.
I didn't say that. I'm just saying, you still know a little bit more about this history than I do. So you already told me you're number 7, but I want everybody to hear it. So who would you say is the greatest number 7 to you?
Well, the answer has to be Mickey Mantle, I think, in terms of historical deeds. But Elway is great, and you talk about if you watched him. The heat on him is can't miss coming out of Stanford, and he's going to save the Denver Broncos, and a couple fits and starts there, but then he's in that title game in Cleveland, and big spot. And I love underdog stories, but I like even more when a guy who everybody is looking at on the sideline, on the other sideline, in the stands, and everybody watching on TV says, the only chance this team has is that guy, and that guy does it. That's something. That's what Elway did in a big spot in Cleveland with the drive. But you know what? Ben Roethlisberger did it when the mighty Steelers defense let down and Larry Fitzgerald got behind him and ran for that touchdown. And a lot of people thought the Arizona Cardinals are going to beat the Steelers and win the Super Bowl. And Big Ben Roethlisberger, the signature drive, this is not hyperbole, in Super Bowl history, 57 years worth of evidence, that is the single greatest drive. It is the headline of his pro football career. It is why he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. You can make a very powerful case for Big Ben Roethlisberger. How say you?
The greatest number 7 of all time plays in, Abu Dhabi right now? His name is Cristiano Ronaldo. You are tripping. I don't understand. Cristiano Ronaldo is the greatest number 7 of all time. It's not even close.
Where's my Steelers hotline? I got to blow in a call there. I need the black and gold bat phone to call in there. I'm telling on you. I can't believe that you would do that, sir.
You just said that John Elway is greatest number 7.
No, I said Mickey Mantle for the record because I don't want to get into the Elway v. Roethlisberger.
When it comes to football wise, I'm going with Ben. When you go to stats, Ben has better stats. You know, Ben has played on teams where it wasn't the best teams as well. And the thing is, he just had to go against the kryptonite of, you know, the Patriots his whole career. But he also had 2 championships within that. All right. Who's the greatest number of all time of all sports? Is it 50?
Yeah, because of Larry Foote. You know, Larry Foote was a great inside linebacker for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and a shout out to him. And you know, it's a number steeped in black and gold because I can also give you another one, David Little. Wait. Ryan Shazier, that's who I'm thinking of. Yes, of course, you are the greatest 5-0 in the history of 5-0s, Ryan Shazier. What a treat it was once again to kibitz with you and get to have this conversation around all the history and hear your perspective on it. Different generation. It's meaningful what Greeny said. Very often we lean into our own generation to make our case, but a fun conversation no matter what. Good times, and that's it for this episode of Don't Call It a Comeback.
I love that, but the greatest number 50 of all time is David Robinson.
I knew you were going to squeeze it in there.
I'm just going to let that go, but hey, make sure to follow, rate, and review the show wherever you're listening. Also, check us out on YouTube on the Wondery channel, and make sure to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. See you all next week.
I've been waiting on this moment my whole life. Can't call it a comeback. Everybody to your feet, make arenas rise. Yeah, I'm saying from the left to right, we get it on tonight. We do it all, but we don't back down. Just give me one shot, one chance, I'ma take it. Fixing up the game, but these records I keep on breaking.